Here we go. Today we got Mr. Ron Brantsner with us, and Ron has been active for a long time on these matters. He's got an event upcoming in Freeport, Minnesota, with two other speakers, Mr. Bradley Dean and Mr. Alex Newman, coming up next week on Friday, March 26th, 2026, from 6 p.m. in Freeport, Minnesota. Ron Brantsner, can you wet everybody's whistle a little bit and tell them what they might expect to hear at this event next Friday in Freeport? What's going on with immigration fraud in Minnesota? A lot of people have heard a lot about it, but what's going on?
Oh, Wes, thank you for the invite. Yes, we're going to be speaking in the Freeport area and also in the Brainerd area on the 25th and 26th of March this next week. And we're going to be talking about the fraud, which is talked about all across the United States on every newscast about the amount of fraud that's happening in Minnesota and throughout the country. And, we're going to be hitting this at three different angles. Bradley Dean, who is with Sons of Liberty Radio. He's in 26 different states. He's an international speaker for Sons of Liberty. And then our biggest guest would be Alex Newman. He's out of Miami, Florida, and he is considered one of the biggest podcasters in the country, who uncovers a lot of these things that we see happening in the country today. So I'm pretty excited to have these two guests. I decided to put it on, and I'm gonna approach mine a little bit differently than they'll approach theirs. Bradley, he likes to talk more about the theologic part of the Christian avenue. So that'll be interesting how we all come at this subject together. I don't know what they're going to talk about, but I like to play off of both of them, so it'll be interesting.
Minnesota has been quite famous for both so-called immigration, I mean, in air quotes for those who are listening and not watching, but also for fraud, of course, with our attorney general testifying and being summoned by subpoena to testify in Washington, and also before the Minnesota State House Committee on Fraud. And are there different aspects of immigration fraud that stand out to the group, and what are the issues that people are tracking locally with fraud in particular? Because that's become a big election issue. It seems like everybody's campaigning on that. Fortunately, that issue hasn't gone away for the last 12 years, 15 years or more, really. It's been around a long time in Minnesota for those who are really tracking it.
Well, when it comes to fraud, it hits us at every different avenue. We're used to it. We're so accustomed to the fraud that we don't even call it fraud anymore. When you have roofers that come to your house and you have an owner from the United States that supplies all those workers from Honduras and different countries that don't speak English, and they're working on your house, chances are most of those people are here illegally. The roofers, the drywallers, the construction workers that has just inundated our workforce, and that's considered fraud. That's just one aspect of fraud. We're hearing about it because a podcaster named Nick Shirley, an investigator, went out there and he investigated some of the fraud in the daycare fraud and the autism fraud, and found out that many of these agencies are running shell companies behind it and taking billions of dollars out of the system. And, they've been taking this money for many, many years. I uncovered this back in 2015 and was in the front page of the Minneapolis Star Tribune talking about the fraud and the 501c3s and the nonprofits. And this is really where I want to focus on. I want to focus more on the nonprofits, because the nonprofits are the ones who are facilitating this fraud scheme. If you look at what happened during the Biden administration, they were down at the border, they were crossing the border, and what happened? They said that nonprofits were giving them shoes, telephones, clothing, giving them jobs, transportation, so on and so forth to get from point A to point B. We need to be looking at the nonprofits, because I believe that's our focus. That's at least my focus. I'll give you an example, Wes. Let's just take three different incidences in the United States. Let's take the Holy Land Trial Foundation. That was the biggest terrorist fraud case in America. from 1991 to 2008. 29 unindicted co-conspirators of Muslim organizations, all nonprofits, were found in a
They
trial,
were
and they
unindicted co-conspirators,
well, the only
right?
reason they were unindicted is because Obama let them off. And so here you got 29 nonprofits that created all these different entities in the United States, all Muslim run, and they come in there. So then we go to number two, we say the Twin Towers. Well, the Twin Towers, we had the largest terrorist attack in the United States where it killed over 3,000 people. That was by Al Qaeda, that was funded by nonprofits. And then you have the COVID case, which we're just seeing now with nonprofits running, tax scams and tax shelters with, as I just suggested, with autism and daycare fraud and so on and so forth, which is probably going to go from 18 to 50 billion. We don't know where it's going to end up in the end. But the point is I just shared with you three different entities, the largest in the country, all run by Muslim organizations. Now, that doesn't mean that Muslim organizations are running all these fraud schemes, because they're not, but they're facilitated by nonprofits here in the United States that are funding all of this and teaching them how to use our system to be able to funnel money from the United States out of the country, which in turn is causing a large increase in taxes in the United States, especially in Minnesota. If we look at your house, your homeowner's taxes, your homeowner's insurance, it's going through the roof because the amount of money that they're shoveling out of the United States to developing countries, we're losing heavy tax dollars here. And I really want to focus on the remittance and the 501c3s. That's where my focus is at.
The foundational document that was put into the Holy Land Foundation trial and is now part of the judicial record is the Muslim Brotherhood's plan for overtaking North America by its own miserable hand. And it states the way that they would finance the overthrow of the United States of America by infiltrating its institutions. And that's a very slim document. It's maybe about 100 pages long, but it's something that Phil Haney spoke about endlessly and carried around with him to show people. And it's obtainable on Amazon.com or as a PDF document online if people just search for it. It's available at multiple different websites as well. And it's really essential reading for most people who want to be informed with the plan. It's the foundational document that came out of the Muslim and Holy Land Foundation trial, discovered in evidence at the raids that were conducted during that trial, in the lead up to that trial. So if we hadn't had that document, we wouldn't have known how the plan was put in place to have us finance the overrunning of the United States of America using public funds. So I have a copy myself, but it's available online.
Actually, it's not 100 pages. It's very short pages, probably very few pages, but it's easy.
Very short.
You can read it. You can read it within 15 minutes, But if you look at the 29 unindicted co-conspirators that were on there, if you look at number 2, that's the Muslim Students Association. That's in 700 colleges in the United States right now, 700 universities. If they're a religious organization, why are they in colleges branched under a political organization to compete against the Democrats and the Republicans? And they all far outweigh the Democrats and Republicans in these major universities. So, and then if you look at number 22 on there, it talks about Palestine, the group of Palestine. That actually is now CARE. The same people that created that particular website is the ones who is now CARE in Minnesota, throughout the United States. An activist group, which I think is probably one of the most dangerous. In fact, I think they were ranked 82nd in the world under the United Arab Emirates as the most dangerous terrorist organization in the world. And then if you look at number 28, I believe it is, that's the triple IT. The triple IT is International Institute of Islamic Thought. And that was talking about the word Islamophobia. That's where that word was created, out of the triple IT in, I believe it was Virginia. And they wanted, and it still exists today. And they're the ones who created that word to attack the First Right Amendment of free speech and to make sure that Islam was considered hate speech if you mention that any derogatory statement towards Islam. So just those three alone, and I'm not even talking about the banking systems or any of that. They're still around. They still exist. They're still being funded. They're all NGOs, and they get federal grant money to keep matching grant money to keep facilitating their programs. This is not stopped, and this is why we need to focus on NGOs, and we need to pull back the reins on NGOs and their authority to be able to manipulate the U.S. Constitution. Because you got to remember, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution says you cannot create a government outside the scope of government. Well, what do you think these Islamic institutes are doing? They're creating Sharia law. And then you tell, that's Article 3, Section 3. That's a treasonous offense. And so we need to look at those particular entities and say, wait a second, you guys can't do this here. The Smith-McCarran Act of 1952 says you cannot. They were talking about communism at this time, but it says that you bring in any idea or literature into this country, into the United States, it's considered a treasonous act, and you can be imprisoned. Well, we need to use the Smith-McCarran Act to bring it back and fight back against these Islamic 501c3s and any 501c3, especially the 10 vologs that are bringing in, the volunteer agencies that are bringing in immigrants in this country. We need to stifle them.
Hey, Ron, I gotta object to some word you just used. Let's please stop calling them immigrants. Just sorry, but let's be kind. There has to be a better word, but
well,
we don't want to be too mean. But I know we're trained to say the word immigrant, but I want to shore up another thing you did say that I want to support. The way that Islamophobia was deployed as a word against anyone who criticized the fraudulent programs was admitted by the staff of Amy Bach, and the trials revealed that Amy Bach and the Feeding Our Future fraudsters, they had promised they would deploy Islamophobia against anyone who dared to question what was going on in the fraud cases in Minnesota. And a lot of us know that was really carried out for a long period of time. Everyone was called, racist, Islamophobic. If you just asked questions about the money and the programs and the funding and what was going on with Feeding Our Future or daycares or the senior nutrition program, or the list goes on where the money was going, you were an Islamophobe and you were a horrible person and you needed to be deplatformed and canceled and so forth. So I'm supporting what you're saying there, but back to you, Ron. Sorry for the.
No, it's interesting that you started off with saying don't use immigration, and that was the premise I was going to put on the flyer, because I really wanted to say immigration or invasion, because I truly believe that this isn't immigration, this is an invasion. And if you look at the 1798, the Alien Act of 1798, where John Madison, our fifth president, said that immigration could turn into an invasion, so I'm just paraphrasing what he says. And then Trump's now using that particular law of 1798 to try to make that point. We allowed 20 million people into the United States in the last 4 years. Now, I want you to put this in perspective. If we have an army that's 1.3 million standing man army in the United States, and we allowed 20 million people into this country, we already probably had 20 to 30 already. That's 20 to 1 that we have as a military, fighting age males that they let into this country from countries that were not on the side of America, 20 to 1. So you have 800,000 police officers that are sworn officers in the United States. So to those two together, you have about 2.1 million people fighting 20 to 40 million people that came over the border alone. But then you have to implement only 2,000 ICE agents because the Army and the police officers don't go after federal law. So 2,000 ICE agents are handling 40 million people in America. 2,000 to 40. I mean, that number is astounding. You would never be able to get rid of all these illegal immigrants in the United States in 50 years at the rate they're going at it right now. 2,000 ICE agents to 40 million people that are brought into the United States illegally. And they're only going after the worst of the worst. Well, they only picked up 14 in Minnesota, 14 in a year and a half. How slow do you think this slow cooking frog is going to take? We need the Army. We need to realize that this is not immigration. This is an invasion. If China took 20 million people and crossed the border into China, they would consider that an invasion, and it would be a war's crime. Would you agree? I mean, I would.
It's strange that we were all, of course, told to stay home for our safety. We were except essential workers only who had their papers could go out. But everyone was told to stay home. We were in lockdown. We had masks on, and we had to take the jab or no jab, no gerb. No jab, no gerb. Stay home for your safety. Everything was canceled, but the borders were collapsed, and all of these people poured in. And some of us noticed the tattoos, and we noticed the facial tats, and we noticed, the people that were coming in, and we couldn't help but notice. And I want to say, like, it's strange when you have undocumented, unvetted people. I mean, there were Chinese people crossing through the Darien Gap. There were Africans crossing through the Darien Gap. And no one was asking how they walked all the way through all of those countries from South America, Central America, on through Mexico, and were transported right into the United States of America. And again, it points to the NGOs, and a lot of research was done about which NGOs were involved transacting in the trafficking of these human beings from other continents to the receivership points on this continent and Central America, through Central America and South America. So it's a massive scale of humanity being moved around, shifted around the globe, and brought into North America. Then we also know that the climate change documentation exists. For some of these groups, they're not shy about what they say about climate change. Their words, not mine. Climate change migration, climate migration. They believe they have a right to come into North America because their documents claim that their ecosystems were destroyed by white people in North America, and so on and so forth. There's a racial element to what they say that if we simply repeat the things that they say, we're called names. And I don't want to get a ban for repeating what they say, but their documents are available. It's their documentation, not mine. But it's always hard to report on these things because you walk a fine line, because you're not supposed to repeat what they say about other people for their immutable characteristics of being white or being Christian or so on and so forth, being male. But that's how they roll with social media platforms. You can't honestly portray the position of your opposition. You can't even repeat it. So just repeating it becomes problematic. See, what else might be an issue?
That's another interesting rabbit hole. Every time you talk, you bring up another direction. We could take this thing into 100 different directions. When you take the climate change refugee, and let's just look at Somalia itself. And you look at Somalia under the Refugee Resettlement Act of 1980. It said that you have to be you're a refugee on the basis of color, race, religion. Well, Somalians are all the same color, the same race, and the same religion. So they're all considered refugees. But if you go back to 1991 all the way to today, Every year, they've been moving people out of Somalia into the Kenya for climate change because they've had droughts every year. So are we bringing, in fact, one year, 50,000 people left the camps and went back to Somalia because they thought the drought was over. So my point is Somalia here because of a drought? Because they don't have the means to be able to plow and to get through a good harvest? Are they really that bad that they're having a drought every single year since 1991? And are they considered refugees? Are they climate refugees? That all comes into play. People don't realize that they're not here because they're running from themselves. They're here because the United Nations is pulling them out and using them as human trafficking to be able to get cheap labor done. So
we noticed at a certain point that they shifted from calling them refugees to calling them immigrants, and that's at a point where people noticed that, look, if you're vacationing back in your homeland, or if you're transmitting in foreign remittances so much money out of the Minnesotan economy back to Somalia, why are you a refugee? How are you a refugee if you're sending all of this cash back to your homeland? For what purpose? And why are housing starts? Why is there a booming economy back in Somalia? Why is there such a real estate development going on in Somalia that people are doing housing starts back there? The foreign minister of Somalia has called the diaspora back to Somalia, said, come back home and help us rebuild. The war is over. Come home and help us rebuild Somalia. And he's calling out to the diaspora, the war is over. So at what point are they no longer refugees? But the NGOs, there were a lot of them that participated in the human aspect of this. There's Lutheran Social Services, there's Catholic Charities, there's a lot. I think Church World Service was involved for a while. There's a whole list of these organizations, and not a lot of public data available on how much money is spent. I wanted to say another thing. Some organizations that do construction work are licensed to have H-1B visa employees that work on work crews, and they're here legally as legal work visa holders for periods of time. I'm still concerned about those workers' rights if they can't defend themselves in English from whichever country they come from, or they don't understand the laws and the systems and the labor rights, and they're probably not allowed to unionize or join a local union. And those people operate as kind of a second tiered, even if they're legal, they're operating as kind of a second tier worker unit class of people. And that helps keep prices low conveniently for the contractors, the roofers, the builders, the developers. It's very convenient for a certain class of people who want those workers, but it also depletes local wages. It competes with the local, teenagers and 20 somethings that are general contractors operating in those business areas that don't have access to the pipeline in, for example, maybe Texas or maybe California, where they have people that reach across the border and hire people from across the border to do those subcontracting labor intensive jobs. So, yeah, there's a legal aspect of that going on, and there's also in perhaps a darker aspect of that going on. And there's been, a lot of activity, on both sides in Minnesota, but there's room for enforcement, right? There's room
well,
for
again, you just opened up two Pandora's boxes again. You took the web out into another different area. You're talking about remittances. Well, remittances are money that you earn, then you can take home and send back to your homeland. And in fact, that money is now up to $900 billion a year now in worldwide remittances. And in 2013, before the big flood and the influx of all these migrants crossing the borders from Turkey to Germany and to Switzerland and to England, the United States, those numbers in 2003 were $111 billion. So between 2003 and 2026, we went from 111 billion to 900 billion dollars. And the more people that we bring in, the more money that actually leaves the developing countries. So, which you say it's driving down wages, and I say I don't believe that. First of all, it's actually driving up the cost of living, taxes, insurance, healthcare,
Right.
schooling, and whatnot. And when you get into the workforce, it's not driving down wages at all. I mean, these kids during COVID were getting jobs at Walmart at $17, $18 an hour while they're in high school, which is like $6 to $8 more than the minimum wage. And you get some of these jobs in the construction field, you were getting $24 an hour at 18, 19, 20 years old. So I don't believe that the wages are driving down. I believe that the big businesses or these contractors are keeping it's not showing when they come to your house, the cost of being able to roof your house that hasn't changed there. They're still competing on the wages of what they're charging. They may be pocketing more into their pocket, but when it comes to healthcare, they're not paying these guys healthcare.
Right.
They're
Right.
the emergency rooms, the taxpayers are paying all this. So when
In
it comes
Minnesota,
to
right. They want free health care for illegals and free driver's licenses, and they want benefits and housing programs for people who are undocumented, and all of these programs for undocumented. And then, of course, you have to have their children in the schools. So if they're not, if they're legally, how are they paying federal taxes? How are they paying state taxes? How are they withholding? Why were they given social security numbers? Why were they handing out uh, a social security number and you have a driver's license, then you can vote. In Minnesota, it was said in committee that, look, they're not able to have any check to make sure that, hey, if you present a driver's license, there's no guarantee that you're not able to vote, because they're not checking the voter status. They're not checking the citizenship status. There's no check for that when you cast a ballot, and there's no follow-up on the ballot. I mean, I'm paraphrasing greatly what was discussed in committee, but it creates huge problems. And the money that goes out of the economy is gone. So I'm agreeing with you in a really roundabout way. Yeah.
Again, you opened up another Pandora's box when you're talking about
Sorry.
licenses for illegals. We're talking about aiding and abetting. We're talking about a U.S. code 1324, 1325, 1326, 1312, A, B, and C 1, 2, and 3 that says you cannot aid and abet, harbor, transport across state lines, or knowingly conceal somebody in the United States illegally. That's a 20-year sentence in the prisons in the United States, which means that if an officer, a sheriff, or a chief of police knows that he picks up somebody illegally, holds them in their jail, allows them to leave after 48 hours before ICE gets there, he is now aiding and abetting. That's a 20-year sentence in the prison. And yet the officers are getting away with the aiding and abetting or concealing or letting them go. So when they say we cannot enforce federal law, the fact is you are enforcing federal law because you're under a commandment of U.S. Code 1325. So don't tell me that you can't enforce U.S. Code or you're going to jail yourself. These officers and sheriffs are getting away with aiding and abetting, and we're allowed it. We know why we're allowed it, because you don't understand your laws. You don't understand the Constitution. And these sheriffs out there are getting away with it because we are so dumbed down in American society. We don't understand what laws that we have to abide and follow here in America. And it's getting real tiresome, when we give excuses for why we have illegals here. Well, you talk to a farmer. I can't get any white people to do the job. Really, what happened 20 years ago? You had everybody working for you. What happened between that 20 years? You know what happened? You dumbed down these kids. You told them that everything that working hard and cheap labor or labor itself is beneath you. We need to bring back common sense, bring back good labor, and let these kids realize that working hard and working smart is more beneficial than to sitting on the couch that they trained us to do during the COVID administration. It's real tiresome when we hear all these excuses. I'm really fed up with it, to be honest with you. I am.
What about the linkage between NGOs and the comprehensive plans? I mean, to open up another Pandora's box, does R versus D at any level of a political race really matter if we don't start talking about the comprehensive plans that govern both R versus D? Will Republican versus Democrat even matter? Will it matter which? Is it going to be an R or a D, or do they just become administrators of the plan, a softer version or a harder version?
You just opened up the biggest Pandora's box of all the subjects that you just talked about and asked tonight. The
I'm known for
comprehensive
asking
plans.
bad questions. Sorry.
Okay? No, you absolutely, that is the most potent question that has been asked tonight. You cannot get rid of fraud in Minnesota. You can't. As long as there's a comprehensive plan in your city, your county, your state, your hospitals, and you have a comprehensive plan, you will not get rid of fraud. There are 17. The comprehensive plans were built off a boilerplate from the United Nations and put into your city and county. And if you read the comprehensive plan, that's based off the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And number 17 of that goal, the last one, is private-public partnerships. That's what we're talking about, public entities partnering up with a private entity, which is a foundation. And that is where we're taking foundations. They are bypassing elected people. They are bypassing the people to have a say and giving it to non-representative, they're not governments, non-elected officials to make decisions on your community who don't pay taxes, who don't have any accountability, and we're giving them authority to be able to run our governments. What do you think the 10 volunteer agencies are? Those 29 volunteer agencies for the Holy Land Trial Foundation. Those were not elected people getting big grant dollars and making decisions on your community, on your speech, the triple IT, on your colleges to have a political organization become a religious organization. These are all foundations, and we need to stop these foundations from functioning as a government entity.
And Ron, along with that, it mirrors the European Economic Community's kind of touch point, flashpoint, where everything started falling apart for the EU's disconnect with its citizenry, where they had these unelected bureaucrats running absolutely every aspect of their lives, and the people began to actually revolt and call for home rule in Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. Everybody started realizing they have no local control over their governments because the EU officials were making all these plans. And I think I would encourage like everybody to start asking if your town has what they call co-designers, because the co-designers concept is a room full of people who are appointed to make really key decisions. Are you seeing co-designers in other communities in Minnesota? Because the co-designers concept is really widespread in Rochester, and it's getting larger. And I wonder if other Minnesota towns and cities are seeing co-designers. The co-designer plans tie in with the nonprofits and the European Economic Community's sustainability goals. They're always involved with everything from parks to swimming pools to golf courses to your streets to your furnace and how you use your air conditioner to your e-bikes, everything that's related to nonprofit entities and rolling out these sustainability goals. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. We're just kind of name dropping here, but these things are really administered through co-designer meetings. And the meetings take place without notes, without minutes. There's no public supervision. The public's not allowed to speak or to observe. And sometimes even committee members who are actually on those boards don't get to participate in the board meetings. And in the co-designer meetings, they're held separately, but they're all appointees. Do you have any notion of co-designers? I'm sorry to spring a question like that.
The way you're describing a co-designer is how I describe the people or the entities that write the comprehensive plans, and they're hired. And the way you describe the way the entity works and how they're putting the rooms, and set up, these are hired by the cities or the counties to write the comprehensive plans. We have like Bolton and Mink. They're national. They're out of Minnesota, but they're also national. They write the comprehensive plans. HKGI. I mean, there's just the University of Minnesota. There are regional governments that write these particular plans that you're talking about, and they're paid big dollars. I mean, St. Claudio, they wrote their comprehensive plan. It was $232,000 to write a volunteer program under the comprehensive plan using these co-designers to write that plan that mimics the rest of the world, so we're all on the same page. These are called boilerplates, and yeah, they write the plans, they submit them. Now, under the law, it says that a comprehensive plan is a non-binding agreement. It is not legal. Well, that's what they tell the people, and in fact, it isn't legal until once they sign on to the comprehensive plan. And I think it's section 439, if I'm not mistaken, point something, something, something. When you sign onto a comprehensive plan, it's a voluntary program, voluntary. But once you put that into place, they'll tell you that is a land use vision of how they want the city or county to look like for the next 20 years. But what they don't tell you, and what they will not tell you, is that once you write the comprehensive plan, the planners will come in, the city and county planners will write an ordinance that mimics the comprehensive plan, which takes a volunteer program and makes it come alive. And now it makes it a legal document. So something that was voluntary, a vision, now becomes a legal document. And this is where, well, we have been roosed by the county and the city to take something that's voluntary and make it into a legal document. And why is it legal? Because the planners are using this to take away property rights and put regulations on their property or your land, your roads or highways, and your infrastructure. And this is why it becomes dangerous to have a comprehensive plan. It's voluntary until we make it alive. It's kind of like the Frankenstein theory. The guy's dead, right? Until we stick some bolts to it. Suddenly he comes alive and, he scares the hell out of everybody. Well, that's what the comprehensive plan is. It's a live document once the ordinances are changed.
And you know how that novel ends up ending in the end? Frankenstein comes back to destroy his creator.
Well,
because Frankenstein is put in motion and he ends up coming back to murder his master who gave him life. And so it's ironic you'd pull, I think it was Wollstonecraft who wrote that. I don't remember the author's name, but it's kind of she's the mother of horror as a genre. It's Frankenstein's particularly apt for that because once it comes alive, can you apply that, if I can jog your memory? Because I learned this from you some years ago and then dug into it further. But way back when Mayor Brady, in the example of Rochester, using the example of maybe free speech, when he signed the contract with the treaty, if you will, with Council of Europe. Yeah, could you touch upon that? I know that's a long stretch and it's a long time ago, but didn't the treaty with the Council of Europe put in motion? We were the first city to do that in the United States. It might come alive for residents of Rochester to understand how a simple agreement can turn into prohibitions on other things, or is that maybe that's too much for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it probably is because the Council of Europe goes back, 10, 12 years under Mayor Brady, and he signs onto that. And it was the first city in the United States that signed on with the Council of Europe. By the way, illegal by all standards, Article 4, Section 4, you can't create a government outside the scope of government. And what they did is they had a non-binding resolution that binded with another country on how they were going to manifest this way of life by using the Council of Europe's theory. And so that was actually illegal to do, and nobody called them out for it. It was the first city in the nation, and then along comes Bloomberg out of New York that goes ahead and funds these programs. So yeah, you guys got a lot of problems down in the Rochester area, severe problems. You got the I don't know if the word's autocracy. You've got some type of government that just runs its own autonomous government outside the scope of law. And they continue to do this and they ignore US constitutional law at every level. And I understand that the University of Rochester and the hospital is a worldwide facility. They're known worldwide, but you are still based under the U.S. Constitution. I think you guys got a lot of issues down in the Rochester area that you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's true. And free speech prohibitions come to mind too, as Islamophobia is further enforced, uh, or other issues are enforced on free speech in the city or by the county, that you're not allowed to question the public policies of the city or the county. It's really
That's because the city of Rochester signed on to the mayor's compact. And once they
right.
signed on the mayor's compact, which is an international agreement, again, bypassed the U.S. Constitution, signed on to an agreement called the mayor's compact, which says that we can stifle free speech. Well, you can't stifle free speech, not in America. Again, the city of Rochester is designed to create their own government. It's called autonomous, and they're bypassing the First Amendment. They're bypassing just multiple things. And again, that's a city. I'd like to just give that city to somebody else because it's a city that it's on its own and it's helping destroy Minnesota as a whole.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues in Rochester. I'm thinking that it's going to be an interesting talk next Friday, and I know everybody's going to have a great time. Be sure to get to the site there and get your ticket. And Friday, March 26th, next Friday, 6 p.m. is the start. Immigration, fraud at the Freeport Community Center in Freeport, Minnesota. And Ron, I'll let you have the last word if there's anything else you remembered while I was saying that last blurb. The other speaker is Bradley Dean, findable on multiple platforms. He's an announcer. You can stream his content all over the place. And Alex Newman is a journalist, multiple articles and books. And I think he spoke in Rochester about education as well before. But great evening of thought-provoking conversation and presentations by three great speakers. Ron Brantsner, of course, is there as well. Ron, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, we hope that you show up at this event. It's going to be approached at three different ideas. I don't know what they're going to speak about. I know what I'm going to be speaking about. At least I have a good idea. It's going to be short, but it's going to be impactful. So I'm hoping that you get there and you enjoy it, and come and have some camaraderie, get the notes of people, and understand that the Constitution is on your side. It's not on theirs. We abide by the rules, the laws. This is the First Right Amendment, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom to express to our own government. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're petitioning our own government to get on the ball and start following the laws. So with that said, I want to thank you for joining us this night, and hopefully we'll see you next week at the Freeport, which is near Albany on Highway 94, and hope to see you there.
Thanks a lot, Ron. Keep
Yep.
up the good fight.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.